Blessed is the faith of those who persevere, though they fail, the kingdom is yours. God, we thank you for this morning and all those who've gathered here in this room with us. We just ask that you would open us to your healing hands, that we would sense that joy unspeakable that surrounds us and all that you are and all that you've made. We love you so much, and we thank you for being prayer.
Good morning. Please feel free to have a seat. It's good to have you with us. My name is Scott. I'm one of the pastors here. And if you are new, we are especially grateful. I got a chance to meet several of you about 8 weeks. So if you're interested in being a part of this thing called Preface, where you get to sit in a space with other people, other like-minded people, other people who are on the same spiritual journey you might be on, no ER visits. They just had a powerful experience, and just want to thank you for those of you we felt in car rides, just sort of challenging and pushing each other and just having a great time. So thank you for those of you who sacrificed a little bit of driving back and forth of your kids. My wife and I had a day to ourselves, and it was glorious. So nonetheless, thank you for being part of that. Abby, who has been our greenhouse youth pastor, or our greenhouse pastor for our children for the last year, is transitioning into a role of a moment we connected. We knew that there was something special here. And you will get to hear from Blair here in just a second. But what I've come to appreciate about her, not only
I'm so excited to be here. It felt a little bit surreal this morning whenever I showed up, and it actually is a year long. So after college, I actually moved to Los Angeles and was able to go to grad school out there, and then stayed for a few years and just fell in love with the urban life and the urban world. So I'm excited to be back in Charlotte, in a city. I came from North Myrtle Beach, so I did leave the ocean, which I'll probably be a little more sad about as the weather gets warmer. But for now, I'm really excited to be here. So I'm approaching 15 years of working with kids and families, and that's been in so many different. I just love kids. I think that they are the best humans in the whole world. I love their curiosity. I love their wonder. I love their desire to connect with people. And so I'm excited to connect with you guys, to take their eyes and share them with our whole community so that we get to see the world the same way that they do. So I look forward to meeting all of you and hearing your stories and just doing life together. So thanks.
Thanks, Blair. Thank you. Thank you. So in the weeks ahead, Blair will be reaching out to you, inviting you to volunteer, inviting you to jump into Greenhouse. Please, as only Watershed people do, I invite you to respond, I invite you to engage, be a part of her program and what we're doing in our kids' space here. And so we take very seriously, we've said this for years, we understand that investing in our children might be one of the, if not the most important things we get to do here. We all have sort of experienced church, some in a good experience, some in a bad way. You've experienced a spiritual narrative growing up that hopefully has been meaningful for you, but for sure in a really profound way. And so Blair will be able to do that. And so if I can make the connection very, very, very tightly, that when you invest here, that when you write a check to what's going on here, it goes to these kinds of programs that is literally marking our children so they don't have, and it takes investment, and it marks and informs the child the rest of their lives. I think you know that, or you wouldn't dive in like you do. And so when we invite you, also for some of you take it very serious, which is also really helpful, we have a corporate matching gift program that many of the organizations with which you work will actually match your gift to Watershed. It's a really, really, really simple process. You can go to our website or the Watershed app, and there's a corporate gift section. You click it on, it'll take you to a website that will search organizations and companies like the places you work, and will tell you if they actually will match with us. The community sees double the investment in terms of how you give. Into that, thank those of you who take very seriously your generosity here. Thank those of you who own this community. You're the proverbial, you walk down the hallway and there's a wrapper on the floor, you pick it up because it's your home, it's your community, it's your space. We love you guys and look forward to the morning and we'll get to experience today.
Good morning. Hi, my name is Sierra, and I've been attending Watershed for about a year and a half. My family and I moved here from Phoenix about 2 summers ago, and we started coming here pretty much right after we got here, maybe a week or so later. We've moved a lot. We knew we would need people. It's a great place to be. So we attended Preface that summer, and some of our Preface groups started a block, which ended this past summer, and now what can I say? I like winter. And I didn't realize how different East and West Coast beaches are until my family and I went to an East Coast beach that sets. So there'll be a bunch of waves and there'll be nothing, and then another big bunch of waves comes. So growing up, I spent my summers at the beach with my little brother doing junior lifeguards while my mom worked. And then when my husband Keith and I were dating, we would do an ocean swim every Friday after work, sometimes in questionable conditions. And when she was 6 months old, we moved from Boise to Phoenix so that Keith could go to grad school. Not long after that, we had our second daughter. And unfortunately, as much as we love Charlotte, the first year here was really, really terrible. It was the hardest year of our marriage. I think I told Keith at one point it was the hardest and worst year of my entire life. When we first got here, my dad passed away about a month into being here in Charlotte. And then I was trying to teach on top of that. Keith was working about 80 hours a week, which he still does. We've got the 2 little kids. I'm trying to keep everybody just alive at this point. And I was completely fried by like November. It's been like 6 months and I just couldn't do it anymore. So I quit my job in February to work part-time, thinking maybe that would help. And about a week later, our dog almost died. He had undiagnosed diabetes, but he's fine now, so don't worry. It's not about to get really sad. But right after that, we had this huge leak in our house, and half of our living room ceiling collapsed while I was at work. And I just want to pause again to plug blocks because my Preface block ladies showed up with a text message with pizza and ladders, and they helped me rip down all the like leftover super wet drywall so that it didn't fall on my kids before Keith could get home to help. And at this point, I was just getting tumbled by like wave after wave, and I would come up hoping for a breath of fresh air, and I would just get a huge face full of water. I found myself taking a deep breath every now and then just because I could. I'd get a text that Keith was stuck at work. Deep breath, telling myself, if you can breathe, you can keep going. And it's really that simple act of breathing, something so fundamental that we have to do it to simply survive, that is saving me right now. So now we'd like to give you some time to reflect on what's saving you right now. And if, like me, for a really long time there, you can't think of anything, I invite you to simply close your eyes and breathe.
So I do write some of the songs that we will play here at Watershed. And this community is definitely one of my most beloved muses, and the place that I draw so much inspiration from. And kind of dragged me into it. And one of them here, Thomas. And I started writing it about a year ago. I remember jotting in one of my little notes on my phone. I use notes for everything, so if anyone ever deletes it, my life is over. But I remember jotting the phrase that's the title of it was like, instead of the armor of God, he had the sweater of faith, and someone was kind of pulling on this thread, and it became like, instead of a sweater, like a part of was what I had to let go of. And so I don't know where you are on this continuum, and not for a moment do I think that my words would represent where you are. I have so much to say to you. It's sacred God. You taught me how to love, and you paid me for doing it well. Saving all the wonder where I go, you will find me pulling the threads, pulling the threads, pulling the your sheep can't touch the depths can see the kingdom when there's room enough for every kind of love, everyone loves. Tell me how to love, Savior, all the children of God who sends their children to hell. There's the liberation, there's the love, and the gospel is spread. I reject your narrow faith, it won't save me. I don't want your whitewashed cross that you gave me. I reject love is
And there was light. Good morning. My name is Matt. In our rural community were really high. There was rain and thunder, and some neighbors that lived next to our property had a house trailer that started. Children ran to our house where we had a basement, and our two families gathered around a table and a candlelight because we had lost power, and my dad had a battery operated transistor radio, and so we were keeping track of what was happening, the warnings and the path of some of these things. And this is the first time as a boy that I remember, yeah, that's right, that's me, hunka burning love, right? In need of some sunscreen. This is the first time that I can remember, or that's the first time that I can remember, like contemplating my own death. And so I was scared of dying. I was like living with this fear of what would happen to me in the next life. And so the next morning, faking a stomach ache, I stayed home from school. And my mom, sensing that there was more to the story than just my belly, fished out of me what was really going on. And within a few moments of her kind of hearing what I was worried about, the two of us found ourselves at the foot of my bunk bed, and her leading me through this prayer that had me asking Jesus into my heart and asking God to forgive me of my sins, because surely at age 8, I was a menace to society, that God was surely angry at me at that age. And I just wanted to be assured a place in heaven. And I remember when that was all over, my mom saying, "Now you'll never have to worry about anything ever again." And this sort of attitude, this sense of wanting to like give back or do something started to surface for me. And I remember going to Miss Harwood, Dorothy was her name, and saying, Miss Harwood, now that all this has happened, like I want to serve God. I want to serve the Lord, which was the language communion. And you know how like there's those little plastic cups that you pour juice in when we take communion? Like, oh yeah, I love that part of church. And then do you know, woefully underwhelmed. And even in my 8-year-old mind going, you do realize I just escaped death, right? Like I literally felt the flames of hell at my feet. And I'm just having a hard time like taking plastic cups to a garbage can and going, somehow those two experiences mesh together. And I'm telling you this story. And to be fair, this was 1974 in a very rural, community. Different world, different place. But this became the first of numerous seasons in my life where I'm like, what is going on? Like, what am I supposed to be doing? Who am I supposed to be? What's my calling? What's my vocation if this Christian thing is really true? And what should the church be doing? Like at some point that question started to surface. And what should the naming or defending or policing, some version of truth or delineating who's in and who's out when it comes to God's love or God's family or God's people? I think one of the things that I've learned over the last 20 years of trying to do this, of being a pastor or trying to ask these questions myself, is that there are at least, there's probably more than this, but at least 2 great dangers that undermine the authentic pursuit of trying to answer. And I think one of them, it's kind of state the obvious, but it's like running from God. Right? Like just saying, no, I don't want anything to do with that. But really, when I say running from God these days, what I really mean is running from yourself. Like running in terms of dealing honestly with the thing under marriage, his job, became estranged from his friends, and he went off the grid for a while. But then he came back and contacted me and said, listen, can we sit down and talk? And so I sat down and for 30 straight minutes, this friend, this person, all he could talk about was how good his life was now. And the reason his life was good is because now he's committed to like fitness, and he's in the weight room 2 hours a week, and he had lost like 25 pounds, and he's chiseled out of stone. And he went on and on and on about his routines and how committed he was to his new diet and his new positive outlook. And initially, 10 or 15 minutes, I was really excited for him because the outward transformation was incredible. Like he looked like a completely different person. But 30 minutes in, he had barely taken a breath, not asked me one question. Have you ever been with someone who you get the sense that they are trying to convince themselves as much as they are trying to convince you how good things really are? You ever been with someone like that? Or have you ever been that person? Well, this was sort of what I started to think might be going on. And finally, after 30 minutes, he breathed and he said, what do you honest? I'm going to be honest, but you might walk away from this conversation and never talk to me again. And he goes, well, what do you think? And I said, I think you're full of crap. And he's like, what? And I said, no, don't misconstrue that. Like, how do you know that you haven't traded one addiction for another? Like, how do you know that you aren't using your obsession with fitness, his body language change? And he said, I never thought about that. He was still running. When you're running, it's really hard to ask the biggest questions of your life and get a response that actually is trustworthy. And I think sometimes running it hinders our ability to do this. Unbeknownst to us, we try to answer these questions out of a place of being half blind or half cocked, out of a place of trauma or pain or self-centeredness. Running impacts our ability to answer this question. I think this too, convinced that you have a superior view of God or reality, undermines our ability to discern purpose or direction or answer the why question. When you become convinced there's nothing more to see, when you become convinced there's nothing more to hear or discover, it becomes so hard to embrace any sort of self-critique or become self-reflective. And what happens often is, ironically, you end up doing the same thing of the person that's running, except it's self-importance or security or certitude that robs you from the process or in the process of dealing honestly with any types of inconsistency or darkness that change directions. You would say the kingdom of heaven, the way that God longs for your life to be or longs for the world, relationships. But our idea behind transformation, in hindsight, if we're really honest, was really more about assimilation and economics and race and politics. Now, our version of running could really be called arrogance if truth be told. And whether we wanted to admit it or not, there was this undercurrent of trying to get folks on the same theological, spiritual, and moral page. It was all about getting people to behave a particular way. It was behavioral management on a good day. And the only purpose was so that we could people that ultimately we wanted to include, or in some instances wanted to help. And there was like this tone deafness that was really controlling who we were without even knowing this deafness towards the deep complexities of the universe and of God and of Christ. Completely out of touch with pain and the unseen structures that in the world that would disproportionately create disadvantage consistently again and again for the same groups of people. And when we started to recognize that, or maybe when we just started to be honest about it, it threw us for a tailspin, and still is to some extent. I mean, how do you create language or discover purpose or mission or direction, personally or otherwise, when you're running from God or when you think you already have all the answers? What do you do? There's this passage in the Christian scriptures from a letter that's written by a guy named Paul, and away from his former vocation, which was capturing, convicting, and executing Christians. He stopped going that direction and actually became one of them, and not just one of them, but like one of their most prolific leaders. And these Christians that he was participating in life with, at some level, they too had death of that experience, and in the reality of what was happening as a marginalized, brutalized, exploited community together in their world. And they were struggling. They were struggling with their identity, and they were struggling how to organize themselves and prioritize their roles, and trying to figure out how to do the work they were supposed to be doing together. And in the first 12 chapters of the 10th chapter, it's like this wise grandparent figure who had been around the block a few times, in this real calming and inspiring voice, sort of leans in and says, listen, we are at each other's throats. We're arguing over power struggles. And people are being dismissed, and problems are going unsolved. But here's what I am convinced is true. He says, if I speak in the tongues of men and angels, but do not have love, I am only a resounding gong. They will cease. Where there are tongues, they will be stilled. Where there is knowledge, it will pass away. Only a reflection as in a mirror. Then we shall see face to face. Now I know in part, then I shall know fully, even as I am fully known. In other words, participate. There's a passion. There's a love that begins to expand. And he says, these are the three things that will remain: faith, hope, and love. But the greatest of these is love. And for centuries, these words have been salve over an open wound in the church. They've been a stabilizing force for individuals and communities, a language of sort for people to help them understand why they exist, or why they exist with each other. For centuries, they've been poetic words in countless weddings, right? Like, how many of you had this read at your wedding? Come on, show hands. Oh, like 4, whatever. I've done your weddings, and I know there's more than that, all right? Jeez Louise. These words suggest they were powerful and profound, not because they are the direct words of God spoken through Paul, but because they were their words, born out of their experiences, born out of their struggle, born out of their life together, born out of the flesh and the blood pursuit of naming what was real. And it would be really easy to take those words and go, well, let's just use their words, which I think has been a wild mistake across Christianity. I want to say we started to realize that there was an absence of language and clarity around who we were at Watershed, but that's probably not giving ourselves enough credit. I think for a long time we'd realized that. We just weren't sure what to do with it. And so throughout the spring and the summer, we started to pull people towards us. Some of you, a lot of you were a part of that. It was like between probably 150, 160 people over the course of maybe 3 months we sat down with, and we're trying to answer this question, and it was really challenging. How do you create clarity around a community or church that's marked more by its evolutionary journey than its own authority, power, or certainty? What sort of words do you choose to embody a sense of direction or missional purpose in light of what is happening in the world right now, in your neighborhoods, in your city, in our nation, in our world? How do you do this in light of the personal and the individual pain that's walking through the door every Sunday or every day of the week in some instances? How do you create communal agreements or a mission that's capable of common ground with each other without asking them to disregard their individuality? As a community that self-identifies as Christian, that places the mythical or the literal or the metaphorical truth of a death and resurrected Jesus, more people, not less people, to have a seat at the table. As a community waking up to its own blindness, its implicit biases, its complicity to structures of sexism and racism and economic disparity, and the way that we're destroying the planet and the climate. Like, how do you create language in the aftermath of these types of realizations? How do you do this when you realize that for 15 years you've been silent to the plight of some of the people in your community that have to deal with structures 24 have been faithful and had your back the entire time you've been in existence? How do you create language when those realizations start to surface? This week is the last week of Black History Month. And my friends of color have told me it's a really complicated month. It's on the one hand, it's totally appropriate to acknowledge the societal contributions made by the Black community throughout our world and our history. But it's complicated because it's history's refusal to include all of history, not just white history, that Black History Month is actually even necessary. And I'm sort of sharing this because I know we mentioned Black History Month the first week of February, that our underrepresented communities in our city and in this community being able to acknowledge that when it's helpful or important to do so. And I say all of these things because it underscores what I'm trying to articulate. How do you wrestle to the ground the best words that allow for that type of realization and self-edits moving forward, and to what end? Create sustainable language that reduces the perpetual wounding of a person or particular groups so that people don't have to keep you or cause you to continue to deal with shame or have to self-edit, or you were made to feel invisible. It's realizing that this won't be for everyone. And here's what I mean by it. In spite of how much you try to include, how far you want to open your arms and try to extend your arms, for some, this just won't be their jam, even though I think it should be. It's too hard. It's too disruptive. It's too confrontational to the internal dialogue or commitments of their life. What statements or words do you create when you are convinced that oneness with God is absolutely possible, and that the best world worth creating is the one where you love your neighbor as yourself? How do you wrap all of that up? Sometimes he laughs at me and he says, "You guys are always trying to be so clever and cute the way that you say things at Watershed. Why don't you just say it like it is?" Is a community awakening, struggling, and loving together as though a different world is possible today. Watershed is a beautiful mess of people, life, with all sorts of stories, with all sorts of struggles and gifts and victories and failures and problems and life longing to awaken. Individually, collectively, awaken to the things that we can't see and awaken to the things that we don't want to see. Jesus insists that the path to becoming a new creation, the pathway of creating a different world begins with waking up. He talks obsessively about this to the extent that you can begin to be awake, to no longer be deaf, to no longer be blind, to see your own greed, self-centeredness, guilt, pain, trauma, bitterness, complicity, to the extent that you can begin to see and own these parts of your life. There's a struggle. There's a world that you are invited to struggle forward to create today. Jesus used language like, it's going to cost you your life. You have to die to yourself. You have to lay down your own life for your friends. You might have to sell possessions or all of your possessions or give your last coin or turn your other cheek or give the coat off of your back. His language was about struggling towards a world that's worth creating today. He was never worried about going back and creating something that used to be. In fact, what got him killed was being really honest as the strategy for what this world needed. His language is about struggling towards the world of his day, of creating in his moment. He called it the kingdom, the already not yet world of God. The world, you and I, as we put away our childish ways behind us, that's all that's left when you begin to do this together, as though a different world is possible today. For many of you, this is already your story. For some of you, you might have the experience right now of, Matt, a lot of this is state the obvious for me. This has been my journey. This is already my language. Some of you, though, have arrived here a few weeks ago, a few months ago, or pain or disillusionment or radical love. Like you were convinced you were unworthy of love. And somehow in this space, something mystical took place. Maybe it was somebody that embraced you. Maybe it was a song. Maybe it was an idea. Maybe it was an image. Or maybe you left and you were driving home in your car. You had a watershed moment. See what I did there? And what I mean by that is not like you had a watershed moment. There was this point where you recognized you had a choice. I can continue to remain blind, or I can continue to be honest about what I see, and I'm going to move forward. I'm going to begin to struggle towards a different reality for myself. And the amount of love that gets unleashed when a group of people decide they are going to take personal ownership in that process and communal ownership in that process is powerful. It's why we think Watershed needs to exist in the world. Because I just don't know of too many places that are willing to go, this is what we're going to do. And we don't know the outcome. We only know the process together as though a different world is possible today. This could be your next tattoo. This is who we are. Because this is who you are. You've informed us. You've told us in no uncertain terms. These are words that have been born out of our experience together for 15 years in some instances, born out of the flesh and the blood, chasing after God And I don't know what your language is for your spiritual life today. I don't know how you self-describe in your pursuit as a family or God, or what you're attempting to do. But can I suggest that these words are words that are worth considering for anyone and everyone. Anyone who longs for something more in the world, longs for something deeper, more alive, more in tune, more whole, more just, more in symphony with Christ, and more kissed by the divine. Can I suggest these are words for anyone who's interested in embracing the urgency of what's at stake in our world today, given the perpetual problems of our city, of our brothers and sisters, of our nation, and our nature too, right? There's the words of Jesus come to mind, and it is huge, dramatic reveal. I think there's this pressure that we often feel in our life to one up whatever it is we've done before this. Or this unspoken rule that somehow the church has to be entertaining enough, has to be provocative enough, is here at Watershed. Does it matter to you, God? Is it allowing us to make a way for us to see the world become something different? If we can begin to live through those lenses, I have to believe that love will explode. Our lives will be different. Thank you, God. And it's in Christ's name I pray. Amen.
About my decision. How odd. For the man with the mic to be the man all his life, while Christ-like stripes did with R-E-M. In the beginning, religion created a mask. The Reformation helped, but soon the patch didn't last. I don't tell, you don't ask. So we created a swift to cut like a razor, swift to call you a traitor, cause you're swift to love Taylor. Now we got bad blood with our neighbor. Who's wrong, who's right?
Like I know a friend. So I'm laying down all my religion. I'm laying down. I wanna know you, Lord. I'm laying down, know you,
Never be Christ-like, never receive good pain, so your faith never rises above minimum wage. So when it's time to save the world, you don't know what to say to your brother that you love when he tells you he's gay. Do you push him away, judge him down till he leaves? Give him a hand, it's not the world that will be. Terror, famine, disease, millions in poverty, hungry, can't sleep. With all this religion, why can't the foundation of the nation, not the 2%? Not the ones that own the buildings that the middle class rent because they make sense. Tell me how you feel.
Oh, I used to think that I could box you in, but I'm laying down. I wanna know you, Lord. I used to think that I could box you in, but I'm laying down. I wanna know you, Lord. Lord, I've been told to be ashamed. Lord, I've been told I don't measure up. Lord, I've been told I'm not good enough, but you're here with me.
Science of opinion, God is not a buffet. You get what you want, so no God on your plate. The preacher isn't God, religion's first mistake. Serving stewards, shepherds, not kings. Has to die to his flesh every day like me. One VIP, the other seats in church are free. We're just groupies, God's the celebrity. Before 313 AD, before Constantine, before the Council of Nicaea, before Romans and Greeks, before Calvin, Alexander, Luther, before Let There Be, before history to the last century, before the death on the tree, before the fall of man was a picture of me. Now to his right before the last three words he would speak, it is finished. Can you believe losing my religion? Thank God. Hope you lose yours. So
I reach out, you find me in the dust. You say no amount of untruths can separate us. If you're willing, I'd like to invite you to stand as we sing that out. I reach out and you find me in the dust. You say no amount of untruth can separate us. I'm laying down all my religion. I'm laying down. I wanna know you, Lord. I'm laying down all my religion. I'm laying down. I wanna know you, fails and never gives up, it never runs out on me. Your love never fails and never gives up, it never runs out on me. Your love never fails and never gives up, it never runs out on me. Your love, sing that with us. Your love never fails and never gives up, it never runs out on me. Your love never fails and never gives up, it never runs out on me. Your love never fails and never gives up, it never runs out on me. Your love, on and on and on and on it goes, for it overwhelms and satisfies my soul. And I never ever have to be afraid. This one thing remains. This one thing remains. Your love never fails, it never gives up, it never runs out on me. No, your love never fails, it never gives up, never runs out on me. Your love never fails, it never gives up, it never runs out on me. Your love, oh, your love, God. Let's give God some thanks this morning. Yeah. God, we love you and we thank you for an unconditional love that destroys religion and brings forth authenticity and vulnerability and an openness that can only be found in knowing your heart. And God, that's what we ask. We love you and we thank you for these moments. The area and the welcome table. If you're new, be sure to stop at the info table and say hi and introduce yourself. We'd love to meet you back there for last call, and have a great rest of your day.